Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're glad that you joined us today. You have joined the best session. Today, we are so fortunate to have our partners from Utah. We have Amy Langoni from Utah Vocational Rehabilitation and Lavinia Grippentrog from Utah State Board of Education. And they're going to enlighten all of us and share all the great ways they collaborate and ensure that transition services and pre-employment transition services get to students with disabilities. So I'm going to turn it right over to you, Amy and Lavinia.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. And I'm so glad to be here today. My name again is Lavinia Grippentrog. I'm one of the transition specialists at our State Board of Education here in Utah. I've been here about 5 years. I'm happy to say that we have added 2 more transition specialists to our state board. I used to be the only one. So that just, I think, speaks to our emphasis on transition as a priority in our state. And I'll quickly have Amy introduce herself and her role.
Hello, good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm Amy Langoni, and I am the Transition and Supported Employment Coordinator for the Utah State Office of Rehabilitation, which is Utah's VR agency. So thanks for being in our session, and take it away, Lavinia.
Okay, great. Well, this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are, we're going to share with you some things that we have been working on these last 2 very challenging years with COVID really changing things so much for all of us. So with that, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide, and I'll kind of talk about the topics we're going to cover today. So first, we'll talk about how we have pivoted many of our events to virtual trainings. We have had a long history of having a 2-day in-person transition institute like many other states. We began in 2011, and we had to very quickly figure out how to do that virtually. We've also, in our second year of providing a webinar and community of practice called Building Meaningful Lives or Meaningful Day for students with complex needs, as we saw a huge need for better planning and preparation for our students with more complex needs through the transition process. And then we've also spent a lot of time over these last couple of years working with our parent center called the Utah Parent Center in creating and delivering what's called Transition University, which are workshops for youth and families around transition. And also, with our focus on transition as a state, we have created a new statewide transition collaborative called our STC. And in alignment with that, our focus for our new state systemic improvement plan for the next 5 years, or otherwise known as ESSIP, is also on post-school outcomes and improving transition services and the flow of those services to our students in Utah. Then we have also created some tools, including a collaboration tool for local level teams to strengthen and also build local level transition teams if they do not already have one in place. And we've also developed a transition planning app for students and families to use in our state. A couple of other virtual trainings that are not on here that I do want to mention, though, is when we all pivoted to online, when schools went to a soft close in March of 2020, we very quickly provided virtual resources in the form of a Padlet for our educators and transition specialists in the field. And we also had to quickly create a transition planning process, or also known as Indicator 13, focused on compliant and quality transition plans. We used to do a lot of those trainings live in person, and we also then had to pivot those onto a Canvas course. On the pre-ETS and VR side, Amy's going to walk you through how we have expanded pre-ETS positions in our state, how pre-ETS services have been provided virtually. Also, we have a new pre-ETS program evaluation in our state, and she'll talk about that. And then other state VR resources included purchasing virtual job shadow. We already had a statewide contract for virtual job shadow for our educators, but we then expanded that as well for pre-ETS providers and VR counselors to use that same product with students. And we've also implemented a customized employment training as well through our state vocational rehabilitation services. So I'll go into more depth on the next slide. So I mentioned that we've had a virtual 2-day, we've had an institute for many years in person, and we had to quickly pivot virtual. We continue to support those LEA or local education agency transition teams through having a virtual platform. We had keynote speakers, breakout sessions, and also provided facilitators for team planning sessions, all done virtually. We've done that for 2 years. We actually are going to have in-person coming up this summer, but the last 2 years have been virtual. And we also continue to have 3 virtual communities of practice for those teams throughout the year to provide support for those team leaders and check in on their progress of their plans. We also have had quite a focus on CTE or career tech education access. And we've also focused our last 2 years of our virtual institute on providing pre-employment transition services through our instructors and our contracts, and also focused on our post-high services, or what we might call 18+ services, those students that are receiving continuous services between the ages of 18 and 22, and the focus on students with complex needs. So those really were our content during our virtual institute the last 2 years. You can turn the slide. Great. So I mentioned that we had a webinar series called Building Meaningful Day or Meaningful Lives for Students with Complex Needs. And we partnered with Transcend Inc. and WorkLink in San Francisco and brought in some subject matter experts to walk us through 3 webinar series and communities of practice. And we asked that the participants attend with a site-based team. And those teams included parents and educators, VR counselors, providers, anyone that was a stakeholder in that site-based team to attend the webinar and community of practice series. And we then provided hands-on tools for those teams to learn to use, and then actually to go out and use those tools and come back and then share ideas and problem solve together on how these tools can be implemented to really help students with complex needs have a better transition from school to work and community participation. Next slide. So also we worked closely with our Utah Parent Center to really develop the curriculum around their Transition University, which was a series of workshops for not only families, but also youth included. Those workshops were provided virtually, and also they created a really nice handbook for youth to kind of walk through and along with those Transition University live virtual workshops. So that is not out yet. It is in its final stages of editing that workbook, but when that is available, I'd be happy to share that with you all as well. Next slide. So I mentioned that our state systemic improvement plan for the next 5 years is really focused on improving outcomes of students with disabilities in our state. And we recognize that we couldn't do that without the help of other partners in our state. So we have created a state transition collaborative that is made up of multiple agencies and organizations, and they're actually coming together and really doing the work and focusing on these 3 strategies at the bottom of this slide, really looking at how can we support youth and families better in the process of transition, and how do we coordinate all of those services from different entities and organizations and agencies to make that more smooth process, and how do we streamline some of that coordination so that more students are getting those services before they leave our LEAs. The STC I mentioned is made up of representatives from agencies all over the state, and we've had a really wonderful response. We have, I think, over 30 different agencies and organizations that have come to the table to really meet and work together to how can we provide better transition services for students and families as they leave our schools. And our focused goal around our state systemic improvement plan is to improve outcomes for our post-high students. So our students that leave our LEAs that usually stay for additional services. So those students that are 19 to 22, we noticed that that particular group has poor outcomes. And so we really want to focus on improving the outcomes of those groups of students. Next slide, please. So this is what our state systemic improvement plan looks like. We have our theory of action I mentioned before. It's comprehensive support to youth and families. So how can we do a better job of really reaching out to youth and families and making sure that they receive the information before they leave, and that students and families are connected prior to leaving their schools. We want to make sure that there isn't a break in those services and that it's a smooth flow of services. So that's another one of our theories of action and strategies, and that there's a coordinated effort between all of these agencies, because that's so difficult to navigate all of that since all of our agencies have different ways of onboarding for those services. So that is our effort, is to really figure out how can we make this much more user-friendly process for our youth and families. Next slide. So I mentioned also our state CBVI team, so our state transition team. One of our goals last year was to provide more supports for our local level LEAs to have a functioning and really effective local level transition team. We surveyed all of our LEAs and found that about 45% had teams, but that some of that had fallen apart a little bit during COVID, and that the teams met and shared some information, and then they were sort of stuck. They didn't really know, what the next step was. So we decided we wanted to provide a collaboration tool, sort of a self-assessment for those teams to either strengthen and become more focused and targeted around their mission and their goals, or for those LEAs that don't have a team at all, and where do they begin? So we put together a collaboration tool that we actually adapted from South Carolina and kind of Utahized it. And along with that, we created a Padlet that also had additional support materials and resources for that team. We then piloted that tool with some of our seasoned local level transition teams that we knew were already functioning quite well to provide us some feedback. We did some virtual training at our Transition Institute team leaders for how to implement that tool and use those resources the best they could. And now we plan to provide that training widely throughout our state. And we're going to share all of these resources and Padlet links with you at the end. Next slide, please. We also had started to work to develop a transition planning app. So we call this Transition Elevated Planning app. There are a few other states that have a similar transition planning app, and we started this process in about 2019, but it really aligns so well with kind of the situation we were all in with COVID and so many things going virtual. So we found that LEAs really found this a useful tool to help students become more involved in their transition IEP meeting and actually drive that meeting, and also to bring parents into this process. It can be so confusing oftentimes for parents when all of a sudden the IEP turns into a transition IEP and they're not really sure about what all happens during transition. So what happens is this is on, this can be downloaded on the iTunes store or the Google Play Store, and it's also online. And students and families can go in as many times as they would like, and it asks the students a number of questions, and then it creates a draft plan that is really driven by the student, that the student can share with their IEP team. They can also email the draft plan, or they can copy and paste parts of the draft plan and put that into a PowerPoint and present that at their transition IEP meeting. It is embedded with links to all of our pre-ETS providers and also our pre-ETS instructors, and also has VR links. It has a nice frequently asked questions page on the transition process. As I mentioned before, it's oftentimes so daunting and confusing for many families. So we also embedded that. And we have, I just checked the other day, and we have over 1,300 users in our transition app since we have launched it last year. So we're really happy about that. Next slide. All right, I'm going to turn the time over to Amy to kind of go over our pre-ETS instructors and VR services.
Thank you, Lavinia. Excuse me. So in Utah, we provide pre-ETS in 3 different ways. We have contracted services, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. We have our counselors make referrals for fee-for-service options, and then we also provide pre-ETS through our staff. A couple of years ago, prior to the pandemic, we decided to pilot some new positions that we call pre-ETS instructors. We have 10 VR district offices in our state, and we had 5 pre-ETS instructors. So at the time when we were piloting the positions, we had an instructor in half of our district offices. Our instructors are primarily focused on outreach in the schools. They're providing job readiness workshops, connecting with educators. They're kind of being a support person to our VR counselors in the schools. They can also cover IEPs and 504 meetings if the VR counselor liaison is unavailable. So that's kind of their role. And then over the summer months, they were setting up work-based learning experiences for some of our VR eligible clients. What we were finding during the pandemic was that our pre-ETS instructors were really valuable because they were helping navigate the nuances to how LEAs were handling the pandemic. So basically, they were able to find out if the school was a hybrid, in person, online, and then communicate that back to the counselor. And also because they had such a presence in the schools, even when the schools were in person, they were often still getting invited to participate if it was safe to do so. So we decided to grow these positions from 5, and now we have 11. So we have 10 VR district offices. One of our districts has 2 just because they serve a very wide geographic area, a lot of rural as well. So they needed 2 for coverage purposes. And then we had our instructors, of course, are now statewide, and they've been given training from Lavinia. She's come in and talked to our instructor group about how to work with LEAs, how to, that educator speak that they need to know, how to best navigate reaching out to schools during the pandemic, things like that. So that's been really helpful. And then another way that we're providing pre-ETS is through contracts. So in addition to our instructors, we currently have 13 pre-ETS contracts who are providing services statewide. In January of 2020, we finalized some work-based learning contracts with the intent to provide a focus on paid work experiences for our students. It was really unfortunate timing because we released the RFGA and finalized the contracts right before the pandemic hit. But we were still really fortunate that we were able to get some work experience placements. I think a lot of that was attributed to the fact that some of our providers were focused on working in rural areas where our numbers were maybe a little bit lower at the time. We try to be really flexible with our contractors, regardless of how they were delivering services, to enable them to have virtual options, meet with students virtually. I think a lot of states were doing that as well. We did release some guidance documents and make concessions for what was in their contracts as well on how to work with students virtually. We also saw some creativity with service delivery with our contracts, as I'm sure many of our other states did as well. So things that they were doing, meeting with employers virtually. I know we had some cases where they were doing job shadows with the employers through FaceTime and virtual campus tours of college campuses, things like that. And I think a lot of our states did that as well. We did release a new RFP in 2021 and really decided to have them, we shifted gears and had our new contractors focus on individual one-on-one services, just partially because of the pandemic and it was easier to reach students that way. Not all of our reasoning for that was due to COVID, but it did help, I think, reach some students as well. All right. Another new thing that we did over the last couple of years is decided to partner with one of our universities, Utah State University, to really restructure how we measured outcomes from our pre-ETS contract providers. Up until 2022, our contractors were asked to develop tools to evaluate their programs and provide us data on the students' skill gains, so percentages of the skill gains that their students were receiving. Although we did approve the measurement tools that the contract providers created, we were working with our university on finalizing those tools individually. We were lacking consistency and then control over the data. So we decided to streamline that, make it more consistent, and then also have better access to the data. So in 2021, we developed pre and post assessments with the help of Utah State University for each of the 5 pre-ETS. We added administration of the assessments as part of their new contracts. So it was a requirement that they use these tools in their new contracts, those ones that RFP that we released in 2021 that I talked about a minute ago. We, along with Utah State, have been providing ongoing training and technical assistance to our providers on how to administer the tools and get the best outcomes and how we can use those outcomes to drive their service delivery. Our university has been really instrumental in helping our contract providers in understanding the importance of getting good data and how it can be of benefit to the students. So it's been really helpful to have that third party involved. We're still in the process of testing and modifying the tools, specifically making sure that they're accessible to all the populations that we're working with. But we're really excited to be able to use the results someday to drive future decisions and target some of the activities in each of the 5 pre-ETS and identify which students may need more support and which might need less. So, and where, how to kind of drive future contracting and asks from our providers. We finally have some baseline data and we're excited to see skill gain in each of the areas. And then as we fine tune the tools, we plan to start looking at trends and outcomes of things like race, gender, age, et cetera, kind of when the students received or started with pre-ETS, the age that they exited, things like that. And then we can be more prescriptive about how we contract with providers in the future. So I'm going to show you a sample of one of the tools. So it's a self-assessment, as you can see. So this is just a sample of our job exploration tool. Some of the students didn't like the smiley faces, but our researchers felt like it was important to have them there. They're a Likert scale. The students are taking a pre-assessment and then a post-assessment as they're exiting the service. And then they just take which of the pre-ETS they're providing to the student, they'll take that at the start. So for job exploration, for example, they'll take the pre-assessment before they get started and then the post as they're exiting that service. And then we finally have some baseline data. This is brand new. So as you can see, we have our pre-test means and our post-test means and then our change scores. So all of our change scores are in the positive, which means that our students are having some skill gain in each of the assessments, which is really exciting. I know the one titled employability might be confusing. For clarification, it's one of our workplace readiness assessments, and the questions are really geared around workplace readiness, such as knowing how to ask for help, getting to work on time, asking for feedback on a work site, things like that. And then lastly, we really tried to refresh and expand our resources during the pandemic. I think Lavinia mentioned this earlier, we purchased virtual job shadow platform to be able to use that virtually with our students. We also use it in person with our students. The really cool thing about virtual job shadow was that Lavinia at our SEA had purchased seats for virtual job shadow before we did. And some of our staff, those instructor positions I was talking about, we're seeing them in the schools and they asked about it. And so we researched it and decided to purchase it as well. And then they in turn were using it when they were providing services in the classrooms. And then some of the teachers that hadn't accessed virtual job shadow asked Lavinia for some seats. So it was kind of a cool way to share resources and then identify how we can all use the tool. We also purchased access to Padlets, which I don't know if you're all familiar with Padlets, but it's a way that you can organize a lot of your tools and resources. We found that because we were providing services virtually, we were collecting a lot of online resources. And so Padlets just helped us organize things for our staff. And so it made it really easy for them to grab and go resources, which is really cool. And we learned about that from our educator friends. So we also updated some of our workshops. So we did create some pre-ETS curriculum back in 2014. And so we spent some of the time over the pandemic refreshing those workshops and just kind of updating them as well. And then we created some new resources. We have a work-based learning rack card. We're trying to build our video library for samples or exemplars. We updated some of our brochures and things like that. And then lastly, although it's not a pre-ETS specific resource, we did work with Utah State University once again and contracted with them to create an in-state customized employment training just to help make CE training and technical assistance more accessible to our providers and help us expand our capacity to be able to provide customized employment in our state. Here in Utah, we do have a school to work initiative where we have school collaborative teams using a customized employment approach to help students connect with employment outcomes. So the CE training has really helped us grow customized and been utilized by some educators as well. But like many of you, we're experiencing shortages with our providers. And so we're trying to continue to build. We did see a big growth in our customized numbers though from 2020 to 2021. So that's exciting. All right, and then here is just our contact information. I know Lavinia and I are both happy to answer questions if you have them later. Reach out anytime to us and we're happy to follow up. I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute just to pull over our resource sheet. I think it makes sense.
We do have a couple of questions
Go
for you, Amy. So do you want to share your resource first and then we'll get into the questions?
Whatever is easier on your end, Missy. We can dive into questions while I'm pulling this up. How about that?
Perfect. Well, I think Emily had her hand up right before you concluded. So I don't know if Emily, if you either want to put your question in the chat or come off of mute.
Really quickly that I didn't hear you when you said that your students didn't like the smiley face scale. Was that because they were older or something of that nature? Because even though like you're older, that's like still a basic way of measuring feelings, and I think they're good.
Yeah, I think your question is why did they not like the smiley face
Yeah.
for the Likert scale? I think some of them just maybe thought it was maybe more juvenile. We got some feedback that they just didn't like it. I don't know that they gave us reasons why, but our researcher just reminded everyone that they do use that for a lot of different forms. So even like with medical charts as well. So it's just nice to have the visual along with the scale. So we decided to keep it in, even though we got some feedback that they preferred us to take it out. Yeah.
All right, the next couple of questions center around lots of interest around your app. Folks wanting to know where, if you wouldn't mind saying again where you can locate that and retrieve it. There was a question about, what was the process like for developing it, who you used, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, great question. So I think probably the easiest is what I'll do is I'll put in, again, a Padlet. We've become a huge fan of Padlets. That way you'll have the link to the online version of our Transition Elevated Planning app, but there'll also be the direct information on how you can download it at the iTunes store and the Google Play Store. But to answer your question, kind of in a nutshell, it took a little over a year. I want to say maybe a year and a half. We reached out to an app developer who has done it for a few other states, and his name is Mike Burgess, and I can put that in the chat as well. And he is from the Kansas Disability Law Center, and he started this, I believe, in Kansas and then helped a few other states. So we had to go through a contract process. There really isn't anyone else out there that does this kind of work that I'm aware of. So that was pretty simple. It was kind of a sole source kind of a situation where we worked directly with him in Kansas, and just had we built the content, and we kind of started with what they had created for some other states and then completely Utahized it. And so that definitely took some time. And so it was a fair bit of work, but really fun and really exciting, and brought in some of our outside partners to make sure that we had all of the links that we wanted embedded, and then we tested it out. And we've gotten some great response. So hopefully that answers your question, but I'll go ahead and put that Padlet link right now in the chat.
Then can you all see the resource list? Okay, so it's also the first link on this list, which is part of the materials that we submitted. So you should be able to grab it from the platform.
Yes, so if folks, just as a little plug for our platform for the conference, you can put that right in your swag bag.
And I just put the link in as well. If anybody wants to open it up right away, I just put the link into the Padlet for our app.
Great. So there's some more questions around. One question was around your pre and post assessments and whether or not they're able to be shared.
So I cannot share them with you at this time, but if you're interested in learning more about them, I can connect you with our researcher who's happy to walk you through them and share them that way. So he wanted to make sure that everyone kind of knew where we're at with them, since we are still fine tuning them. And then also that we're helping you make them specific to your state as well, or kind of explaining the nuances to our state. So you reach out to me and I'm happy to connect you with him and he can get that to you.
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah.
Another question was about virtual job shadow, wanting to know if it was worth the investment.
We find it very much worth the investment. We've been using it for 2 years now. It's taken a minute for it to grow in our state and catch on, but now that we were 2 years in, our staff are using it way more than they were a couple years ago. But it's nice because you can use it virtually or in person. So our staff are doing both those things, and then they're constantly building their library as well. So they're adding new things, and I'm very receptive to feedback. So we've enjoyed using it, but we always tell our counselors and instructors that it's just one tool that we have. So.
Yeah, and I would just emphasize that we've really liked it too. I think educators really like it. The platform itself is constantly adding and growing. So there's lots and lots of videos. There's life skills videos on there as well. There are assessments in Spanish. I'm pretty impressed with how it's constantly evolving. And you know, they don't charge you more for when they add things. So it's been a really useful tool for a lot of our educators. And I like the fact that now we're sort of speaking the same language. So when providers are coming in, or the instructors specifically, or the VR counselors, we're all kind of have this platform we can, a common platform that we can speak around.
Great. Amy, there was a question about, and I was just asking Martin for clarification he was asking about whether or not you were able to charge the cost to the reserve. So I wasn't sure if he was asking about the app. Yep, he's asking about the app.
The transition app. So we did not purchase that. So our Lavinia at our SEA did.
Yeah, we thought about, you know, partnering on that, but sometimes contracts, when we share contracts, can be really difficult, and it really wasn't that expensive that we were able to cover it with our funds out of our special ed office.
Yeah, and I think that would get a little tricky with VR just being an administrative. It would probably, they would put it in the administrative cost bucket, so be challenging anyways. There's a question about whether or not you could provide the name and contact for the app developer.
Yes, I can do that. In fact, I'm just pulling up the website. It's Disability Rights Center of Kansas. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. It looks like their website's changed a little bit since I've been on it last, but I'll also put the app developer's name, and he is out of this office in Kansas.
I'm just curious about how often you all connect with one another. It just seems like you guys have a really great relationship, and I just was curious about how you maintain that.
We connect quite frequently. It really depends on what we have going on that month, but I would say at least once a week we're in some kind of collaborative meeting or a phone call. We have lots of meetings together, but we also, anytime there's a question that involves both of our partnerships, we get right on the phone and try to address it right there. Yeah, and as Lavinia said, they've added some to her team, so it's been really great that we have lots of team members now too.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, we do a lot of troubleshooting together. I sit on the State Rehabilitation Council, and Amy sits on our special ed advisory panel as well. So we do sit in a lot of this, a lot of the same kind of councils and committees. But if we have an issue come up in an LEA, we really put our heads together to try to figure out how to best solve that and support our LEAs from both sides.
And then, as I mentioned earlier too, Lavinia's been helping us with our new positions, just helping them get oriented to how to work with schools. And so that's been really great to have her kind of explain it from an educator perspective as well. So
Great. There was a question about whether or not you provided training to any of the students on how to use the app.
So most of our training has been, I've done some for the Parent Center so that families were aware of it, and all of our Parent Center staff was also aware of it, since we have some embedded Parent Center staff in some of our larger LEAs. So I wanted to really make sure that they understood and were promoting the app. And then we've done a lot for educators, transition specialists at conferences, not directly to students. So we're really kind of targeting educators. We have had some educators use it with students and then presented how they used it in live trainings. So during our Transition Institute, for example, we had an example of how a teacher used the app with a student with complex needs, and also an example of how a teacher used the app with a student online during COVID, when that student chose to stay virtual for their services.
Great. I think I'm going to ask Sandy if I missed any questions.
No, you got them all, and we both are trying to answer some questions.
But I think
No,
I
you got 'em
saw
all.
one person asked if we could put all of these Padlet links into the chat, but I think that it's probably easier if they all have access to this resource page, right? And maybe
Yeah.
we could explain where to find that.
Yeah, I tried. So this document is listed under the resource tab in the actual Institute platform, and you can just scroll down. It's the title of this session, and then it's got a dash and it says resources, and you can view it, you can put it in your swag bag, or you can download it.
Maybe if we have a minute, we could just share a screen and show them how to access all that. Would you mind, Sandy?
Not at all.
And while we're doing that, if folks have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat.
So here it is right here, and I will go back and show you how I got there. So if you go up here to the resources tab at the top of your screen, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tabs to the right. Click on that, and then you'll just scroll down. And it's delivering pre-ETS and transition services in challenging times, dash resources, and you can view it. You can download it. There's like an orange download button from the document itself. And then you can also put it right in your swag bag.
And then your swag bag is also another tab on the screen. All right, any more questions for our folks from Utah? Well, thank you, ladies, so much for all the information, all the resources. You're doing great work.
Thank you.
Our pleasure to be here. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great rest of your day.
And you guys will be available for the Extend the Learning this afternoon, right? So if folks maybe think of a question, they could pop in, right?
Sure.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.